Let their love shine. That's why we're here, right? That's why we're on this planet, to let our love shine. So thank you for being with me today, letting our love shine. The talk is about forgiveness. So I heard a wonderful, moving talk from a man named Azim. He lived in Kenya. He was trained in business, but Kenya was very dangerous for he and his family. A lot of violence. So he moved to America to keep his family safe. And he was an investment banker. Investment bankers do very well financially, and so his desire was for his two children, one boy, one girl, to flourish in this wonderful world of the United States where he could keep his children safe and protected. His boy was in college, had a desire to become a photographer for the National Geographics. Great kid. Delivering pizza to make a little bit of extra money, as college kids are wont to do. Went to deliver at a home, and a 14-year-old boy shot and killed him. When Azim found out, he fell to the floor crying. Everything he had made was so his kids could flourish, and there's just nothing he could do to protect them. He said that he heard a voice, this thing, though, as soon as it happened, and that voice said, there was a victim on both sides of the gun. So after a while, he went to visit the young 14-year-old boy that killed his son. And the 14-year-old had done it to impress gang members to show that he could do this. And so they talked about the stories. And Azim forgave this 14-year-old boy, recognizing that he was a victim of silent violence himself. And then he went to go meet the grandfather of this young boy who didn't have a father, but he was staying with his grandfather, and they talked quite a bit. And so what they started to do, and have done since then, is they travel the country talking together as the grandfather and the father of a victim of violence. It's the power of healing, the power of forgiveness. And it's an extraordinary story of what forgiveness can do. That when we return to love, that it doesn't bring back his child, but it can heal us in ways that we can't even begin to imagine when we hear something as violent as this. There's many stories like this. I'm actually, my head's flooding with stories right now, but let me just ask you, I can't say I'm sorry at the people who are online, but the people who are in the room, how many of you were raised in a teaching or a family that taught forgiveness? So most of you, I would say 90% of the people. So we know so the forgiveness, we're familiar with it now, where once it was a radical teaching. It might be radical if you never learned about it, so it's always important to learn the power of forgiveness. And what is forgiveness? I think as I was exploring it this week and watching various things and getting in discussions with some of my colleagues about it, it became clear of what's the definition of what forgiveness. What do we even mean by that? So the way it's defined is it's the releasing of anger and resentment. And so we're going to separate anger and resentment in a minute, but before we get to that, there was a quick clip. The reason why this discussion got activated is because I saw a quick clip from someone I don't even know. The beauty of Facebook is there's a lot of really intelligent people out there. And it's from, maybe you've heard of her, Reverend Nadia, I was going to memorize her name, something Weber, Burkholz Weber. Has anyone heard of her? She's a Lutheran minister. She's radical, man. I mean, when I heard a woman Lutheran minister, there was a picture in my head, and it wasn't her all tatted up, and she's great. And it was this 2-minute clip on forgiveness, and she said, man, forgiveness isn't about, I won't even say, she swore in her thing, isn't about being wimpy, it's about breaking the chains of oppression. As long as you're staying connected to whatever that experience is, it's becoming part of you. And then you can even start to imitate it. That we want to break the chains, and forgiveness is the way of breaking the chain. It's powerful. And it's true. When we forgive, we break the chain. We're not holding on. So the idea of forgiveness, just to remind all of us, is that it's not about condoning the behavior, whatever that is, of the other person, or the experience. The person might be fine, just a particular behavior happened, and we forgive it. So we're not walking around. There's a wonderful exercise, if you haven't heard about it. You take a backpack and you fill it full of stones. If you don't have stones, just fill it full of books, something that's heavy, and walk around with it for 5 minutes. Take it down, take all the books out and walk around, and you're light. That's what forgiveness does. That's a visceral experience of the power of forgiveness. That you may or may not be aware that you're walking around with this heaviness energetically in your soul, in your heart, in your mind, and that once we have forgiven, that's gone, and there's a lightness of being. And so the intention of forgiveness is to walk around with that lightness of being. Nelson Mandela talks about, without forgiveness, you have someone who's doing something to you, and you're so angry with them, you start taking poison to kill them, but you're just killing yourself, and it doesn't touch them. The anger and the resentment kills us. So we want to live a life of forgiveness. The topic today is Forgive to Live. Now, there's a whole range of what we're forgiving. So I want to talk about that first. There are little things that we want to forgive quickly and easily. We can get to a place, if we start making this a way of life, as a way of practice, we can forgive things pretty quickly. So for instance, I have a relationship with other drivers on the when I'm driving, and for me it's less about the being cut off and more about speed. Sometimes I really like to drive fast for a reason, or sometimes I just like to drive fast, and I will suddenly get behind a slow driver, and they drive me crazy, like, move, why are you going so slow? And I can catch myself, and I'll say, oh, well, you know what, there's times where I want to drive slowly, and I bless you, and can you please let me get by? but I can shift, right? That's an immediate letting go. Like, I get mad because I'm in my own little world, and I'm having fun, and they're blocking my fun. Forgiveness. And it's conversely. There's times where I just want to drive slow. I'm in a mellow mood, and then there's someone who's tailing me. I'm like, just chill out, dude. Where are you going in such a hurry? Come on. And then like, oh, those times I like to drive fast, or I'm late for a meeting, or someone could be hurt. And I often, because I'm so aware of it, I usually pull off to the side and let them go by me. Because I don't need to stop their good, and I want to have my peaceful drive without someone tailing me. When we start making forgiveness as a way of life, it just can be quick and instant, and we're not walking around holding on to it. It's not something, like, in fact, people were saying about driving. I'm like, oh, I don't have issues when I'm driving. But I do. But I realize I do it so quickly that it doesn't hold on. That's where we want to get to with life, where with a path of forgiveness, it can happen in a second, but we can also forgive in a second. But we also know that there's a lot of things that are much more serious than that. That can really hurt, devastate, have long-term consequences that are very painful. I heard a powerful YouTube by a woman named Sarah Montana. And she was very, what's the word? She's very young. She looks like she's in her late 20s, I think, maybe early 30s. But young in her energy. So I'm just listening. She's sort of bubbly. But what she said was extraordinarily profound. Like, there was so much contained in that one video. And unfortunately, I only watched it one time, so I probably will go back and listen to it. But a boy in her neighborhood murdered her mother and brother. One day, he came in and shot them. Well, he shot the brother. He left. The mother found the brother. He realized he forgot something and came back and saw the mother over the brother and realized she knew who he was, and she killed him. He killed her. What she said was that because we live in this culture of the power of forgiveness, the power of letting go, the healing aspect of forgiveness, she said she felt from herself as a good, she didn't say Christian person, she said as a good person, but my sense was there's a strong sense in her that she needed to forgive, and to forgive as soon as possible. And she said she certainly felt that in the culture around her. This is terrible, you gotta forgive. And she did. She did the forgiveness work. She did the little processes, and she forgave. And she got a great job. She went to school, college, got a great degree, got a great job, got married. And then she said, I quit the job to write a play about this incident. She said, I was on a spiritual quest. But she said the real issue was I told everybody I had forgiven. I told myself that I had forgiven, but I was still absolutely chained to this experience. I hadn't actually let it go. That in fact, the three of them, my mother, my brother, and this boy who murdered them, were all intricately linked in my head. And everywhere I went, I carried all of them with me. I wasn't conscious of it. I still went on and did college, I did other things, but it was always there energetically, which is why one day I just suddenly quit out of nowhere and said I have to write this play because it wasn't done. But she was confused because she said, well, how do I actually forgive? I thought I had forgiven. What do I do? And she gave stats that I don't remember. I remember she said forgiveness shows up in the Bible like 68 times. I believe she said Jesus said something about 22 times. She said, I get it. It's really, really important. But it does not say how to do it, like really forgive when someone has murdered your mother and brother. She didn't talk a lot about the perpetrator in the way that Azim did, but she did find out about him. She was horrified at the conditions. It was almost all solitary confinement, and that he had grown up. First, he was underage and then became of age in a prison, and she said it was just awful, and she didn't want that for him either. But what she learned about her own forgiveness was that she never allowed herself to get angry. She never allowed herself to feel the experience. And this was sort of an interesting point, something I hadn't thought about. She said, it wasn't about me forgiving from my mom's perspective or my brother's perspective. That was their experience. I was not murdered by him in the way they were, so I couldn't forgive him for that. I could only forgive him for what he did to me, the impact it had on my life to no longer have a mother, to no longer have my brother on this plane, to get married and not have my mother and brother there, to have my husband not know these relationships. He took all of that from me, and so I had to start deeply feeling my own feelings. And she said it actually took me a while to get in touch with what those feelings were, because I was so upset about what happened to my mother and brother. I hadn't taken in my own feelings. And this actually starts to come up a lot. That, you know, if you're on YouTube and you have a video and then they start suggesting a lot of YouTubes along the same line, I started noticing a lot of other YouTubes of people who tried to forgive and could not. That there was, and there was a sort of theme of the pressure to forgive. I need to forgive, I need to get healed, I need to get forgive, I need to get healed. But they don't feel the feelings first. We need to feel the feelings first. This really hit home for me, and I think it's why I feel strongly and why I've really been with this topic. Way back in the 90s, as I've said, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, and my job was to see the wholeness and the perfection in each and every person, regardless of all the different stories that I was hearing, and there were many. I was unrelenting to see the wholeness and the perfection, that part within each and every one of us. We all have it, that has never been hurt, harmed, or endangered, that is already whole, perfect, and complete, and nothing, no circumstance, no condition can touch that beautiful light of God. And so my job at that hospital, and I was very clear about this, and I'm very grateful for it, was to see that wholeness in every person with whom I come in contact. And to hold that for them, even as they're going through the psychological healing. So one day, when I was home and Oprah was on, I would watch Oprah Winfrey, and I don't remember most of the shows, except for this one is like seared into my brain. And it just occurred to me last night, I bet it's on Google. And I Googled it, and it is there. The sound quality is terrible. It's also pretty dark, so I'm not going to suggest it. But it was with a guest who his job was to defend children who have been abused. He was a lawyer, and he did all of that pro bono work. So he did a lot of other work to pay for this type of lawyer work. And he had written a letter to Oprah because he was mad at her. He said, you keep coming on this show and talking about forgiveness, and you talk about your own experience. Excuse me. Don't bother me. You talk about your own experience of being molested, but you never actually get mad. I've never seen you get angry. And he said, if it was happening to somebody else, if it was happening to your daughter, if it was happening to anyone else, you would get mad. But for yourself, you won't get mad. And so they had this back and forth. And so this is the important part. This is what we want to get to. There's a difference between anger and resentment. And so what Oprah was fighting for, she's like, well, I don't want to be a hateful person. I don't want to be a bitter person. I don't want to walk around. And he said, I'm not telling you to be a hateful person or bitter, but I am asking you to feel. And so there's another lady I'll talk about in a minute who is differentiating between anger and resentment. We want to feel the anger. Anger is emotion, though. So anger, if we allow ourselves to actually really feel it, it actually moves us into action of some kind. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a perfect example. She was angry, and from that she took action. If we do not take action with the anger, and it's just sitting inside of us, it becomes calcified, solidified as resentment. And that's what we don't want. We don't want to walk around as this hardened, bitter, resentful person. So that's what Oprah was saying. I don't want to be that type of person. And he was saying, no, you have to feel. And as you could feel his energy around it because of his work. And he was very strong with it. And she finally says, you're right, I've never forgiven my abuser. And oh, by the way, last Sunday I was home at my father's and my abuser was there and I was making him breakfast. And she said, now I'm listening to you. And I'm like, man, I wish I'd just gotten mad at him. I would let myself go and just be angry for what he did and say it wasn't okay that he was in my dad's house and that I was making him breakfast. He had to leave. Like, I never have expressed that anger before. And not that you have to live there. I'm not saying you have to live there, but it goes back to what Reverend Nadia was saying, is that the purpose of forgiveness is to break the chains that tie us. And in that moment, what Oprah was saying was that she hadn't broken the chains that tied her to her abuser. And as someone else said, when we forgive, we make all sorts of choices then. We can still be in relationship with the person because once it's forgiven, besides, remember, so there are many degrees of what we're talking about forgiving here. So in some ways, you absolutely are going to stay in relationship with people that have hurt you. We have microaggressions, they call them, little things that a spouse can do, right, Jack? That we do to each other, to our kids. We all have these little microaggressions. We constantly are forgiving those and letting them go. We don't want to hold on to those. And then there's ones where you say, no, I forgive it, but I'm not going to be in a relationship with you anymore. I'm making a boundary. But either one of those decisions is coming from a place of freedom, not bondage. And that's the place we want to come from. That's a place of authentic love. Even if I have a boundary, I'm making it from a place of authentic love for myself. No. Doesn't mean I have to hate the person, but it's not healthy for me to be there. So there was another woman who was talking about working with women of domestic violence. And again, the first quite like, let's go into forgiveness. And she said, I kept running across all these women who kept saying, I should forgive, but I can't forgive. I should forgive, I can't forgive. So she went the opposite route. And I love this so much. So that's why I'm going to share it with you today. She said, okay, well, talk about why you hate them, because hate's not a bad word. And she gave the definition of hate, can't remember what it was. But again, it's just the absence of something you love. If you hate something, it's because it's keeping you from what you love. So let's get clear about the feeling of hate. So basically, she's giving the same permission that Andrew Vox was giving Oprah Winfrey, is feel your feelings. What do you hate about your ex-husband? And so she was giving an example of one of the women that she worked with. I hate my ex-husband because he molested my daughter. I hate my ex-husband because he took my money. And I can't remember the last one. I hate my ex-husband because something took her health. I can't remember what it was. It's a very different process than writing your forgiveness exercises. Then, after that, she said, okay, so what is it that you love? I hate my husband because I love my daughter. I hate my husband because I love education, because the money he took prevented her from getting the training she needed. I hate my husband because I love my health. So he shifted it to what I love. And she said, okay, now let's just take out, I hate my husband. I love my daughter. I love education. I love my health. She said, okay, now use that as your affirmation 3 times a day. What you love, what you love. And she said, suddenly, it was like I was with a new person. She was just radiating. She wanted to know. She was getting information about education programs. Her relationship with her daughter began to flourish because she wasn't walking around in hate. When we are in love, hate dissolves. Do you remember being in love? Can you remember that? Some people are still in love. When you're in love, your heart's so open, and you just suddenly forgive everybody instantly for everything because you're just so in love, and all the stuff that used to bother you doesn't bother you as much anymore because you're in love. This is the power of love. But now it's genuine love. Now it's love that came through first feeling the hate, but again, remember, we don't want the hate to calcify, so we're not saying hate as something that you want to become. You don't want to become hate. You don't want to become anger. You don't want to become bitterness. None of those things. It's to move you. It's just to allow. She was talking about hate being like anger, an energy that moves. It moves you forward. It makes you take action. And in that action starts to come from love. And once we start to be in that love, the anger, the chains that tie start to dissolve. We are no longer holding on to those chains because we are now activated by the power and the force of true and genuine love. Not forced love, like when Sarah first forgave the guy who murdered her mother. That was sort of forced love. I'm going to love him. I'm going to be a good person. But she wasn't authentically feeling it. The idea is to move into this love that we authentically feel. Forgiveness. Forgive to live. And then one of the ministers were saying, well, that actually is a process of forgiveness that she was giving. She was just using a different technique. And I said, great. Because the idea is not about, forgiveness isn't the thing itself. The thing itself is the love, is the healing. And forgiveness is a way to get to that love. But sometimes we have to go another route. And so I'm sharing all of this because I think we are in a spiritual community. And we talk a lot about forgiveness. But sometimes any spiritual tool where you sort of feel like you're forced to do it, but it's not coming from an authentic place, stops to be helpful. So sometimes you can go right into those forgiveness tools, and it works and it shifts. But sometimes if it's a really deep thing, we have to go into the feelings of it. Another thing that really got me activated about this whole forgiveness thing is I had a friend from the past, way before New Thought. And they said something recently that jolted me. And they said, I'm done with this whole forgiveness thing. And this is a great person. And they're like, I'm not forgiving anymore. And I did not like hearing that. I'm like, what? And I sort of asked, and he said, there's repeat offenders. I can forgive all I want, but they keep doing it. Joel Goldsmith talks about, well, we don't have to worry about, we're not condoning the behavior, but if you deeply and powerfully forgive somebody, they will start shifting their behavior, and that is absolutely true. Sometimes. It's absolutely true sometimes. And there's so many stories where we can talk about that. And if you look up forgiveness, you're going to hear amazing stories. But I always like to show the flip side of the coin, both sides. So when you forgive somebody and you deeply and profoundly forgive them, that can change their behavior, but there's often times where it does not, where that person continues to harm other people, for instance. You can forgive them all you want. It says, Nelson Mandela says, you can become free, but that doesn't mean that they're going to stop doing what they're doing. And so this gentleman was saying, I'm not okay with that. So if I'm forgiving them, there is a part of me that feels like I'm accepting that behavior. And I had to think about that one a lot. If it comes from people you don't particularly care for, I don't think it hits you. But when it's someone you really respect and care about, I had to really be with it. And then I had to be with myself. Because we know that the biggest person we have to forgive is ourselves. Because no one is more intimate with our faults and our failings and our weaknesses and our little and big things that we don't like about ourselves than ourselves. Yogananda and Joel Goldsmith said the same thing. This is why it's all started hitting me. It's like it was coming from every direction. So this guy said it, then Yogananda said, well, forgiveness is good. That's why but you have to keep forgiving. Why you do 70 times 7, because actually the thing that you're upset about, if it's a deep thing, not just surface things like driving fast, if it's a deep thing, we have karmic habit patterns, and it's going to keep going. You can keep forgiving, but it's going to take a while. And then I read it, same thing in Joel Goldsmith, until Jesus also said, go and sin no more, meaning until that behavior completely stops, you're going to have to keep forgiving, and there's layers to everything, and you keep forgiving until that chain that keeps us tied to that thing dissolves, and there's no more karmic habit pattern. And so with both Joel and Yogananda and this guy, it's like, man, that's heavy, man. I just want to forgive and be done with it. I don't like that heaviness. But then I was with myself. I had to really be with that, because you know what? I see my weaknesses every single day. I think, well, if it's a habit pattern, and so Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, probably did not say his name correctly, said, we are all spiritual beings, have a human experience. I'm sure you've heard that before. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. But we are human. We are whole, perfect, and complete. We radiate and shine purity and light and love and grace and beauty and abundance and joy and freedom and delight, and we get to experience that everywhere we go and see the face of God everywhere we go. And that is an extraordinary place to live. And we're also human. And what I started to notice as I was being with this is I am a repeat offender of being human. Like, no matter what I do, I have these limitations. How do I be with that? How do I be with the fact that as much as I love our teaching and the power and the life of pure spirit moving through in every atom and cell of my being, and to give and love and share, receive love, how do I deal with my humanness? Those places that are everyday limited, that can act out of unconsciousness, that can be hurtful to myself or to other people. How do I deal with that every single day? This is a repeating pattern. Is it possible to break the chains? Because I keep going back. I love that definition. It breaks the chain so we're free. So for those of you who have heard many of my talks, I love the Eastern teachers like Paramount Yogananda, Shunryu Suzuki, and A New Thought. They all have a similar, well, not Zen, but Yogananda, New Thought is very much about knowing this wholeness and this perfection of our beingness. And I love it. And I can get into, in Vipassana meditation, I can open up to the freedom and the vastness way beyond body-mind, my body-mind. I can, in Zen, open up to this incredible freedom. But I was never quite happy. I mean, I can know God's joy, I can know God's beauty, but there was still something missing. And so I found these beautiful monks on Mount Athos. And that was what I realized was missing for me. And it's part of they're a Christian, they're an Orthodox Christian. And I don't know enough about all these, I don't know the variations, but I just happened to read about these monks. And they moved my heart because they were so gentle, because they were so humble, and they owned their limitations. And they became a model for me. if we only, as Shunro Suzuki says, if we only own one side of the coin, we don't own both sides of the coin, we're not telling the full story of our own humanity, of our own life on earth. We are whole, perfect, and complete. We are radiating pure light and love and joy and freedom. That is absolutely true. And nothing, when we live in that place, actually can limit that. The human experience that limits it is still only temporary. It will dissolve into the nothingness from which it came, and we will return to that whole, perfect, and complete. But even that temporariness, to own it, to feel it in my heart, to not run from it, to accept it as a daily part of my spiritual practice, softens my heart, allows me to be a little bit more gentle with myself and with other people, a little bit kinder. So every time that I mess up, every time I live from my limited human self, I can own it and love it. I found a place of loving that. So forgiveness is now a regular part of my practice every day of myself and others, recognizing that I will have this limitation to the day I leave this body. And that even as I transcend and can know the light that transcends, that is never limited by time and space and all the things that are limited by being in time and space. But at the same time, it includes time and space. It includes my humanity and other people's humanity. Because I might be the only one who had this secret desire. I say in past tense. I still have this secret desire, although it's not secret anymore because I'm telling you. There's layers, and I started to recognize I have a layer of resentment. It's gotten a little bit solidified, and I didn't even know it, that I'm human. I really have a vibration. It's not a thought. I don't say mean things to me. I'm not that place anymore where I say mean things to myself or I beat myself up. But I started to become aware of this vibration of resentment, that I have limitations, that I still have to be human, that I still have to show up and people can see my weaknesses, that I'm not perfect. And I can even see it picturing outside of myself, looking for spiritual teachers that will then be perfect. Because I don't like this thing called humanity. I'm thinking about this idea of calling out or not calling out, all that stuff that's happening. We don't believe in victimhood or blaming and shaming, and yet it seems to me we are now in a culture of blaming and shaming everybody. And as I listen to it, it's always for being human. I'm mad at you for your limitations. I am mad at an organization. I'm mad at a culture. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad at my family members because my expectation is that you are going to be perfect, you're whole, perfect, and complete, and you are not operating at the level. It's very hard to forgive people when they're being human and they're going to continue to be human tomorrow and the next day and the next day, if that's your expectation. Now, when I say that, this was not a conscious, I'm not going around, and this isn't about deep, horrible, painful things that have happened to me. This is just every day, the minutia, the micro things that upset me, that are holding me back. Why I keep getting drawn back to these monks, because of their softness, their humility, their gentleness. And so what I have learned personally about, and continue to learn, and will always continue to learn, about what true and authentic love for me is, it is both holding that absolute joy of the beauty and the magnificence of pure light, of unlimited love, of unbounded joy that permeates our very existence, our physical, emotional, and mental bodies, that permeates the life of the people that we love, that we can see in this earth, in nature. We can see all of it. And in that same place that holds all of that perfection and beauty and harmony and joy and wisdom is also the same place that can hold all of our limitations. And we find a place to be with the painful emotions that come with our human limitations, and we find a place of deep and abiding forgiveness, gentleness, and tenderness, extraordinary tender love that can accept all of it. And most importantly, that can accept ourselves. Forgive ourselves every day. Forgive those people that we love the most every day. all those little micro judgments that we make towards somebody that keeps them a little bit out of our heart, a little bit apart from us. People who believe differently than us keeps us a little bit apart. We continue every day. So that true love, not just the transcendent love, but I will say that's what continues to draw me back to the Christ, because I don't find this in a lot of other paths. That authentic heart that says, in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of the separation, in the midst of my limitation, there is a love beyond what I can possibly ever humanly imagine. And I surrender into that, even with all my limitations. We forgive to love. The topic today was forgive to love. Was for forgive to live. And Jack kept saying, you mean forgive to love? And I said, no, it's forgive to live. And he said, you mean it's forgive to love? I said, no, it's forgive to live. And yet when we forgive to live, we're forgiving to love. That's why we're here. Let's pray. And so we allow ourselves to drop into our heart, into the tenderness of our heart that can feel it all, feel the power and the love and the radiance and the healing light of unconditional, unlimited love that is everywhere present. Just breathing into that it is everywhere, in, through, and as all creation, every atom and cell, the entire cosmos is right there in the midst of our heart in all of its glory and all of its light and all of its love. We do not have to fix it. We do not have to make it happen. It simply is. And we just breathe into that isness. And we give thanks knowing that this love is who and what we are, that we radiate and pulsate this infinite oceanic love, this love without end, this unconditional love, that it is pouring through our physical, emotional, and mental bodies. And we are so grateful that we get to be vehicles of God's love and God's light in our relationships. We get to be a vehicle of God's love and light in our workplace, in our daily livingness. We just say thank you, God, for that. And we also feel in the depths of our heart that we are a vehicle of God's love, even in our weakness, even in our vulnerability, even in our limitations, even when we can't say the thing that we think we should say, the healing words, where we say something maybe different than the healing words, where we maybe tiny bit or a little or more have hurt anybody, or anybody has hurt us. And what those places in our heart where we judge ourselves and we're not totally allowing that forgiveness in, or we judge somebody else and we're not able to forgive yet. We might still be in the anger stage. We might still be in that deep sadness, whatever is going on. And that's okay, because love is there in the midst of our weakness, in the midst of our limitation, in the midst of our inability to forgive in this moment. It's okay. Be true to our heart, because no matter what is happening in our heart, behind all of it is this divine light and this divine love. And we don't need to rush there, because it's already here in the midst of it. And so we see and feel our limitations, we see and feel our weaknesses, know behind all of it is this deep and powerful love, a love that does not force itself into our life. It does not force itself to love. It just gently and radiantly heals us and softens us day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, decade by decade. We allow love to have its healing way with every aspect of our being. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing forced. There's nothing repressed. That this entire self that each of us is, all the good and all the bad, all the dynamic complexity that makes us us, is loved just as it is right here, right now, in this room, in this moment, in this beautiful space of our heart. To this divine love, we give it all to you. We give it all to you. We surrender, we accept, and we love. And we love yet again, and we love yet again. and deep abiding peace and everlasting joy, we let this word be now. Accepting this healing light in every corner of our beingness, in every corner of our relationship, in every corner of our life, we allow this healing love to permeate our entire existence. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And we let it be now, and we say together, and so it is.